I declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 22nd of October held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:32 p.m. Welcome councillors and staff and members of the public. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on this evening, and I recognise their ongoing connection to our land and waterways here in Subiaco. I'll take attendances now, and it looks like we've got 8 councillors and a mayor all accounted for in person, which is great to see. I like that. Elected executive leadership team, I think we've got 3 of the 4 usuals, the CEO and directors of Development Services, Corporate Services and Business Improvement are all here in person, and we've got an acting director, Technical Services, Chris Rogers. Welcome to you. And thank you to the other staff for being here. We'll call on you as and when needed throughout the meeting. Okay, I'm not aware of any leave of absence requests this evening, so we'll move on to disclosures. I understand there's at least 2 disclosures, both in relation to C3. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I, Penelope O'Connor, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C3, Central Parking Precinct Plan, to be considered by Council at its meeting on 22nd of October. The type of interest is a proximity pursuant to section 5.60B of the Local Government Act. The nature of my interest is that I own a property and live in Coolgardie Street, which is in the subject area.
Thank you. And we may have taken these last week, but in any case, we'll take them again. Councillor White, you were the other one with an interest in C3.
Yeah, it's absolutely the same. Do I have to read it out? Okay.
Just in case not everyone was listening.
Okay, sorry. I, Simon White, wish to declare the interest in C3 Central Parking Precinct for the Council meeting on the 22nd of October 2024. Proximity interest pursuant to section 5.60B of the Local Government Act. The nature of my interest, I'm a resident of Coolgardie Street.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. I, Nicola Johnston, wish to declare an interest in the agenda item C2. It's the black spot projects for delivery in 24-25. It's an impartiality interest pursuant to clause 2.2 brackets 2 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I served on a committee and was a member of an organisation with one of the residents on Derby Road.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Great, we'll move on. There were no public questions previously taken on notice, so we'll move straight into tonight's public question time. We've got a single submission comprising of 2 questions from Scott Arbuckle of Union Street in Subiaco. Mr. Arbuckle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 questions and I'll give them both and then we can handle answers. My first question is related to item C3 at the Ordinary Council meeting tonight. My question is, what efforts has the City taken to understand the requirements of other landowners in the area between Duke Street and Nicholson Road? And my second question is, how can the City tell if people outside the City responded to this item on Have Your Say, and did anybody external to the City do so? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the Acting Director Technical Services to answer both of those.
Thank you for your questions. In response to question number 1, as part of the Central Parking Precinct Plan, direct consultation was conducted with all properties in this area via post which was hand-delivered by officers. The City monitors feedback received from residents, businesses and visitors to the area on an ongoing basis, and this assists in the formulation of the precinct plans. This feedback is supported by observations from officers in the field. In response to question 2, respondents were requested to provide their addresses as part of the consultation process. Through this, the City can confirm that responses were received from external respondents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move along to public statements. We've got a number in relation to C2 and C3 of tonight's agenda. We'll work through them in order, beginning with a statement on C2 from Sean O'Neill of Derby Road in Shenton Park. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, I understand Nadia has been advocating on behalf of the residents of Derby, but my statement ahead of this council meeting was to share my concerns and confirm Nadia's view. Nadia's views are not those of a minority group of residents, but shared by a view of many that will be impacted by the works on Derby Road. As a resident of Derby Road for the past 11 years, I object to the raised speed plateaus proposed for Derby Road between Nicholson and Aberdare. The city so far has shown no evidence of pedestrian or vehicle occupants being injured on these sections of road. Instead, the incidents occur at the roundabouts intersecting Nicholson and Onslow roads. It's therefore unclear how the city has advocated for and received funding for the Black Spot project without credible evidence. I'm not against speed bumps, however, these should be placed at the approach to both Nicholson and Onslow roundabouts, where the casualty incidents have occurred, and driver speeds approaching these intersections endanger pedestrians and other road users with limited visibility. The proposed raised speed plateaus appear to be a waste of taxpayer money and will significantly impact local residents on Derby Road as a result of constant braking, acceleration and thumping, with no proven or justifiable benefit for the proposed speed plateaus and significant detrimental amenity to local residents on Derby Road. I cannot see why the council should endorse this project. Should the council be concerned with the speed of vehicles travelling along Derby Road, a valid and proven alternative would be illuminated speed signs with a happy or sad face, indicating the driver's speed on the midsection of Derby Road and the speed humps approaching the roundabouts instead. Thank you. That's my submission. Do you want me to stay up on behalf of Joe Evans?
You're reading a statement on behalf of someone else, are you?
Yes.
We don't actually have someone by that name on the list. I'll ask governance to work out what that's about. Oh, Josephine Evans.
Yes, sorry, that's fine.
Okay. I was looking for a Joseph Evans. Yeah, look, that's fine. While you're up there, why don't you read Josephine Evans' statement as well? Josephine being a resident of Derby Road also.
Yeah. So on behalf of Josephine Evans at 72 Derby Road, I live on Derby Road on the east side, a few houses down from the Nicholson Road intersection. I'm very concerned about the proposed installation of speed bumps on Derby Road, despite evidence that they will not improve the safety on the road and in fact may make it more unsafe, and despite most residents in the area being opposed to them. Unfortunately, despite the petition from residents and several viable alternatives being proposed, the City of Subiaco appears determined to only recommend speed bumps. Their argument is that they believe speed bumps to be the most effective means of speed control, and they would appear to have disregarded safety concerns around speed bumps on a road with parking permitted on both sides and require negotiating one-way traffic flow, and that speed bumps have the highest negative impacts for residents. It is my belief that number one, speed is not the cause of incidents on this section of Derby Road. Therefore, speed control measures will provide no improvement on the occurrence of incidents. Number two, the black spot funding programs are intended for areas with repeated casualty accidents, being medical or serious injury or fatality. The city has identified one casualty incident near Nicholson Road in 2018 and two casualty incidents near Aberdare Road, and nominated the two blocks between these intersections for black spot funding project. The window in which this area met the minimum criteria was less than 2 years, and as of April 2023, it no longer meets this criteria. I urge the city to look for a solution that will have more chance of making Derby Road safer without the use of the two speed bumps. If the city is not willing to look for a better outcome, the alternative is for the full project to be rejected. Directing the city to return the federal funds will allow those funds to be used for genuine black spot program purposes, addressing areas with repeated casualty crashes, not on a street which currently has 0 mid-block casualty crashes recorded. I'm also concerned about residential amenity and the significant noise impact from residents with older houses which have bedrooms at the front of the property, only metres from those speed bumps. Installing devices that are not required and which result in increased noise and emissions should be a difficult project to approve for the council that values environment and livability. Derby Road is not a federal black spot area. The proposed scope will have no impact on reducing casualty crashes, will have no benefit in reducing crashes on the street, as speeding is not the cause of crashes, and will impact negatively on residential amenity and the environment through increased noise and emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement's from Karen Bowker-Douglas of Derby Road, Shenton Park. Another statement on C2.
I'm Karen Bowker-Douglas, a resident along Derby Road between Onslow and Nicholson Road, and I speak on behalf of my husband, who is presently overseas, and myself. While we support traffic calming measures along Derby Road, we are strongly opposed to the installation of the raised plateaus, better known as speed bumps. Living along Derby Road is vibrant, social, and has a cohesive sense of community. And if there's one thing we'd like to see changed, is the volume and pace of traffic along Derby Road. We are in full support of traffic calming measures, and while speed bumps seem like the obvious quick fix, we know this is not the case. You only need to look to recent editions of the Post to see the animosity and division that installing speed bumps creates for residents. The Post from April 2024 quotes Frank Aquino from West Leederville, saying it's a multi-million-dollar solution to a problem that never existed in the first place, regarding the changes to Ruislip Street. I quote this because we know our own city's data on accidents and fatalities does not support black spot funding along Derby Road. An article titled "Rough Reception for Vincent Humps" by Bonnie Christian used the words blight and debacle regarding the Nedlands project. Ben Dickinson's article in October 2024 stated there was broad support for a roundabout on the avenue, but the proposed speed bumps were far less popular, 55% rejecting speed bumps and chicanes. Previous traffic calming in and around Cambridge Street referred to as historical mistakes ready to be repeated, claiming 20 years ago speed bumps were installed and a year later they were removed, and the speed bumps were ground out from Carrington Street in 2011 after 3 years of community backlash. It's a little wonder we're opposed when this is the rhetoric coming from the communities in the western suburbs. Our home has 3 of the 4 bedrooms facing Derby Road. The current noise level means we have magnetite double glazing with little effect. The last thing we need is to increase the noise from our street with a minimum effect on speed, with increased emissions, accidents and chaos over the weekend parking, as well as inconvenience to us and our neighbours' movements. As residents, we implore you to find a more effective measure of improved livability along Derby Road. As Mr Lindrew stated in a Post article earlier this year regarding Vincent Street, Nedlands, it would be cheaper and more sensible to reduce the speed limit on Vincent Street to 40 kilometres and to upgrade traffic calming at intersections. We would support this move along Derby Road. Again, I implore you to reconsider this decision and turn to the other traffic calming solutions that are more suitable to the parking needs, transit of emergency vehicles, and solutions that promote safety while minimising noise and further disruption along Derby Road. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement's from Helen Austin of Derby Road, Shenton Park.
Good evening. Mine's much shorter than that. I'm a long-term resident of Derby Road, been there for over 31 years. And yes, I'd really support working with the Shire to actually bring in some calming solutions to Derby Road, which has become... As a resident of the area, I know it very well, and I cannot support the control measures that will provide no material benefit in reducing crashes on the street, in particular casualty crashes, and only introduces a potential source for rear-end accidents on the street, in addition to noise pollution and increased emissions. It is unclear how the city managed to source federal black spot funding for mid-block control, where there is no evidence of mid-block casualty crashes. This site is not a genuine black spot, and the use of federal funds that will not provide the outcome intended for those funds. The Shire should not approve this work. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement comes from Wendy Campbell of Derby Road, and I understand it's going to be read by Nadia Glazier. That would make sense.
My name is Nadia, and I'm a resident of Derby Road. In June, a petition was presented to Council with collected responses from 40% of properties on Derby between Onslow and Nicholson, with 96% of residents opposing the speed plateaus. Contrary to any preconceived notions the councils may hold, residents' concerns are not primarily about noise, but about safety. Having spoken with many residents, it is clear that they believe speed bumps will increase accidents, not reduce them. If there is no real benefit, why should this project be endorsed? We reached out to accredited senior road safety auditors to seek clarification. They reviewed the project and technical data, noting that there is an equal likelihood that the proposed speed bumps will result in an increase in crashes, being rear-end accidents, as there is a likelihood that they could mitigate potential property accidents. He then stated, "This is all irrelevant." In his words, and I've shared these full statement and the full email with the council staff, with the council members, it's fair to say that black spot funding projects can be categorised as what he terms as genuine road safety projects and bandwagon road safety projects. I'd like to reiterate, these are his words. Bandwagon road safety projects are those projects that are sold as road safety projects but are very unlikely to result in a reduction in serious injuries, either because there is no regular history of these casualty crashes occurring or because the proposed treatment has nothing to do with the type of reported crashes. Derby Road project is a good example of a bandwagon road safety project because it is for speed bumps between Aberdare and Nicholson, where there have not been any reported casualty crashes in the previous 5 years of reporting. Based on the above, it is fair to say councillors should be aware that whilst the project has been assessed and approved as a black spot project, it does not and will not result in a reduction in casualty crashes on Derby Road, as there aren't any to reduce. I appreciate the officers at both the City and the Black Spot Consultative Panel have been able to secure funding, most likely by applying BCR to property damage crashes, but due to the competitive nature of the program, this is at the expense of other genuine road safety projects. That's the end of his words, my words. Again, the intent of the federal black spot funding is to reduce casualty crashes, with multiple statements from professionals highlighting this project will not reduce casualty crashes. The funds need to be reallocated to another genuine black spot location. Was that the end of my time?
No, that was the 30-second warning.
We believe the responsible action is to return the funds based on the evidence and the independent reviews. Failing to do so will risk escalation to this matter to the federal ministers, and the project is misusing resources for a genuine casualty site. I would like to take the opportunity to voice our appreciation for a recent change on the street. My previous statement and correspondence to council members has highlighted the residents' concern for crashes at the intersection of Nicholson and...
Just press the button and sum up, please, Ms. Glasio.
I would like to really highlight this. The City recently installed speed plateaus on the approach to this intersection. This is the intersection that Sean voiced as concerned, that we've all been voicing, as this is where, if you were to flag casualty accidents on, or any accidents on Derby, this is where they occur. So thank you for putting in those speed plateaus. It's going to make a genuine positive impact. Anecdotally, residents nearby have already said that. So thank you for that, and would like to, if there are further crashes, I believe the next thing to address would be the blind spot that's at that intersection, but let's monitor that together. I'll continue
Thank
with...
you. So now you'll read the statement that was submitted by Wendy Campbell of Derby Road.
Yes, this is what makes sense. Hers is very simple. So this is from Wendy and Rob Campbell of Derby Road. We support the advice that Nadia presents in her submission to councillors and her recommendation for next steps. We have read Nadia's submission carefully and completely and appreciate the thorough and professional approach she has taken with this issue. Thank you very much for all your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And just to clarify, everyone's got 3 minutes to make a statement. At 2.5 minutes, you'll hear the tone that we just heard, and at 3 minutes, the microphone cuts out automatically. But I suspect the next statement won't trigger the 2.5 minute warning or be cut off. But Linda Green, Derby Road.
Hello, I'm Linda Green, and my house is at 113 Derby Road, right where the speed bump is proposed. And yes, my master bedroom does face the street. I believe the proposed speed bumps appear to have the potential to cause more problems than solve anything. It's not a section of the road where cars can speed because of the congestion, and I'm concerned any cars hitting the bumps fast will be hazardous as well as excessively noisy. Also, I wonder how will urgent ambulances and buses cope? Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of statements on C2. We will move on to a few statements now on agenda item C3. The first statement was received by Robert Tamijan of Hatesbury Road, Subiaco.
This is a statement on behalf of the Subiaco Scout Group, 399 Rockaby Road, Subiaco. Agenda item 10.1C3, recommendations 1H and 1J relating to the available parking on the western side of Rockaby Road between Nicholson Road and Duke Street. My name is Robert Samron and I'm the current group leader of the Subiaco Scout Group, which was established in 1908. The Subiaco Scout Group strongly objects to the creating of a loading zone and the reduction of the existing parking time allowed from 2 hours to 1 hour. The Subiaco Scout Hall was built in the 1930s and has been an asset to the community of Subiaco since that time. The hall is used by Scouts for youth between the ages of 5 and 26 and also used by various groups and other small gatherings and classes. Our group is run entirely by volunteers and is a not-for-profit organisation. The users of our hall need parking availability that exceeds 1 hour in order to attend the activities in our hall. The new development at 385 Rockaby Road already has parking and secure loading dock within the building that should allow the safe loading and unloading of goods without the need to take up public parking bays. In the article by Richard Pappas, dated 30th of August 2024, on the Celsius Property Group, and I quote, the commercial space on the northeast corner of the development has been designed specifically to accommodate food and beverage/retail, and we are now actively marketing a secure, suitable operator that has the concept and will resonate with the community, both above and surrounding. F&B commercial tenancy, 237 metres plus Duke Street Pocket Arc in the northern verge, northeast alfresco dining, secure loading dock, 5 designated car bays, 2 visitors bays and substantial parking on Duke and Rockaby. It seems unfair that the existing parking bays with the 2-hour restrictions will be changed to add a loading zone and reduce the remaining parking bays to 1 hour. Unfair for the Subiaco Scout Group, the users of our hall and the surrounding businesses. I strongly urge the councillors to reject the officer's recommendations and leave the section of the precinct on the western side of Rockaby Road between Nicholson Road and Duke Street unchanged. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a statement from Greg Barrow of Redfern Street, another statement on C3.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Recommendations 1A through 1E will adversely affect the availability of resident on-street parking in the streets to the south of Hammersley Road. Those changes are changes that reduce parking from 2p to 1p. And I've attached to the submission, which should have gone to councillors, a diagram that I've created that shows the area I'm talking about. Under the heading Parking around King Edward Memorial Hospital, the report states parking on the streets near the hospital should be prioritised for patients and visitors without significantly affecting parking availability for residents. Prior to the uniform implementation of the 2p restrictions in the area south of Hammersley Road, there was a 3p restriction to the west of Federal Street, and prior to that, no restriction at all. So you can see where those areas are on the diagram that I prepared. While those less restrictive controls were in place, non-compliant parking grew to the point that the sections of Redfern Street and Federal Street adjacent to my property were completely occupied by non-resident parking. If the proposed changes are adopted, then we'll again have less restrictive controls south of Hammersley Road, and the availability of parking for residents will be significantly affected. The report advises that the precinct plan seeks to move hospital workers to paid parking. It is not just hospital workers who park all day, and history tells us this won't happen. The report also informs that residents directly affected by the proposed changes received a mail out. The City did not recognise that residents immediately adjacent to the area of changes would be affected. I completed the Have You Say survey, providing explanation for opposing the proposed changes. I became aware of the City's of today's agenda from an article in the Post 10 days ago. At that point, there had been no engagement with those who responded to the survey. The report shows that between 10 and 16% of respondents oppose recommendations 1A through 1E. Brief comment is made on reasons that residents agreed with the changes, but no acknowledgement of reasons for opposing. I've asked for this information to be made available. Another change proposed is to reduce the price of parking at Stubbs Terrace Car Station 70. In brief, if you look at the map, I've indicated that offered parking is 2 to 3 times further than a free all-day option in 2P area close to our house. In the meeting last week, a councillor asked if 1 hour was sufficient. While an answer was given.
Mr. Barr, I can see you've just about finished your statement, so it would be good to hear the rest of it. If you just press a button and continue, please.
Thank you. I have proposed an alternative that could be considered is to reserve a portion of the parking for residents. This is done elsewhere in Subiaco, and to note that that's actually around the corner from this building. Given the gaps in stakeholder engagement and evidence that the proposed changes will not achieve the City's stated objective, I ask that Council does not adopt recommendations 1A through 1E. Thank you.
Thank you. The final public statement for the evening comes from Scott Arbuckle of Union Street. Another statement on C3. Mr. Arbuckle.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors. I wish to speak to you about item C3, the Central Parking Precinct Plan, specifically recommendations H and J. The placement of 7 parking bays with a large loading zone on the west side of Rockaby Road between Duke Street and Nicholson Road. As Chair of the Subiaco Scout Group, please note the group's objection to recommendations H and J. Our Scout Group has been active in the Subiaco community since 1908, operating from 399 Rockaby Road, Subiaco, since 1930. The group provides valuable life experience to young people between the ages of 8 and 26, an experience that is more relevant today than ever. When we're not meeting in the hall for youth activities, we let it out to other community groups such as stamp collectors, yoga and Pilates groups and dancers. It offers one of the few low-cost, effective places for Subiaco community groups to meet. The small amount of revenue is essential to us. Parking in this area is often full, contested between restaurant goers, officers and our members and patrons. The availability of parking affects our activities and revenue. The loss of these bays means that 7 to 15 more of our members must now cross a busy road to access the hall on a meeting night, which may amount to 30 to 50 more people per week required to negotiate a busy road to reach their group meeting. There are 9 parking bays in this immediate area, and the staff recommendation as written is to take 7 of them. The primary benefit will be to the Chippers development as the only commercial premises in this section of the street. A loading zone about the same distance from the cafes on the north side is always empty, as deliveries are made via the laneways behind the commercial premises. Staff has supplied no data in support of the change. There is a substantial loading area inside the Chippers development, as advertised by the developer recently. Consequently, there is no need for an additional loading zone in this immediate area. Yet here we are with a recommendation to take 7 of the 9 bays from public use, see paragraph 5, page 21 of the staff report, based on limited data. I'm troubled by the lack of data and the absence of correlating material made available to the public in the agenda, contrary to past practice. Subiaco's strategic community plan focus area 1 is our sense of community. We are part of the community. We rely on reasonable access to parking, and we do not feel that our interests have been taken into account. Parking controls should balance the needs of all stakeholders. The staff recommendation does not achieve balance, will primarily benefit the Chippers development, and I request elected members to correct that. My request to you, councillors, tonight is to reject staff recommendations paragraph H And J, then undertake genuine consultation to properly respect and balance all stakeholders' requirements in the next revision of the plan. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Okay, moving through the agenda, petitions and approved deputations. I understand we've got a petition that has been handed to Councillor Johnston and you would like to table this evening. Councillor Johnston, what are the details?
Yes, thank you, Mayor McMullen. Yes, I've got a petition received from Di Twig to present on her behalf and about 100 residents from Central and East Ward for a fenced off lead dog park in Central Subiaco Ward. Can I also just make comment? I believe Greg Barrow submitted a petition to staff this week.
Sounds more like a question, but you don't actually need to table a petition at a council meeting, but staff, have we received a petition from Greg Barrow? Okay, we've received an informal petition from Greg Barrow. Well, we will take the petition in relation to the dog park, duly submitted, duly received and tabled at this meeting. There's no voting requirements, so thank you, Councillor Johnston, and thank you to the petitioner and signatories. Okay, councillors, I will now ask you to confirm meetings of previous minutes. We've got a single set of minutes from the Ordinary Council meeting of the 27th of August 2024. I will seek a mover and a seconder that we accept those minutes as a true and correct record. Councillor Kosovich moving, Councillor De Vries seconding, and given that we're all here in person, all votes tonight will be electronically via a press of buttons, so I'll call the vote now. Okay, the motion's carried unanimously and the minutes are accepted unanimously. And I'll now make some announcements. Councillors, in a month that I think you've quite rightly been thinking long and hard about certain agenda items, listening to community concerns and balancing staff and external advice, I think it's good to take a moment to stop and reflect on some of the other things that the City of Subiaco has been doing in the past month or so. Firstly, there was some really good news that I think everyone at the City can be proud of in the form of an award, a Minister's Award for Place and Innovation, awarded for our work on Walmsley Lane, handed out at the Wolga Conference by the Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Hannah Beasley. The award recognises projects that transform underutilised public space into vibrant space for local communities. For those listening, maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but Walmsley Lane is a pedestrian laneway that runs past Bar Amelie off Rockaby Road. Our work on that laneway was part of the city's ongoing Green Walks project, which aims to improve the usability and character of a number of small laneways and pedestrian routes. So well done to the economic development team in particular for your work on that and for your ongoing work on the Green Walks project. The good news continued with a nomination in the Economic Development Australia Awards for in the category of strategic thinking for the work that the city has been doing to integrate art with economic development. The awards took place in Melbourne at the National Economic Development Australia Conference. Unfortunately, we didn't bring home the award, but I think we're well placed to continue our good work in economic development, thanks of course to our economic development staff. And the good news continued with the highly successful launch of our Forest Walk redevelopment. And then into late last week, we launched the No More Blank Walls Festival. It's a celebration of street art featuring about 13 artists with murals in various locations around Subiaco, a festival hub in the Bark Road car park. And it all kicked off with the launch event last Friday. The good news continued with Unwind Subiaco happening last week, and then into the start of this week, the City of Subiaco was proud to host the Craig Silvey Awards for Young Writers. There were about 900 award entrants from across the state this year, some great creativity on show, and a very successful awards night last night attended by Craig Silvey, the patron. And in amongst all this, the City of Subiaco has kicked off a two-stage expression of interest and tender process to appoint an architect for the redevelopment of the vacant former council chambers and admin building on Rockaby Road. So there's some great work happening by our staff. Some of those are a result of council decisions. Some of them are simply executing strategy and direction set by council, but it's a great team effort by the City of Subiaco, and there really is a lot of good work being done at the moment. So thanks everyone for your role in that. So having got through the public part of the meeting and my announcement, we should now move on to the agenda items. We've got a number of reports from committees and officers, and of those, there's a handful of them that may be adopted on block on the basis that they're not the subject of any amendment or alternatives submitted by councillors ahead of this meeting. So the possible on block vote I've got in front of me would consist of items C1, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8 and C9. Councillors, are there any agenda items that you want to remove from the on block motion? That's good. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the on block motion. Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Johnston. Okay, I'll put the on block motion to the vote. Okay, the on block vote is carried unanimously, which for those watching means that the agenda items forming part of the on block item have been carried unanimously without debate in accordance with the officer recommendations as shown in the agenda. So we'll make our way through the remainder of the agenda, and I think we might have saved ourselves quite a bit of time, in fact. Okay, look, apart from a confidential item later on, all that leaves is items C2 and C3. So we'll move straight to item C2, the Black Spots projects for delivery in 2024-2025. We've got an officer recommendation to carry out said works. We've got an amendment submitted by Councillor Powell, and I'll therefore be looking for a mover and a second for the officer recommendation to get things started. Yeah, okay.
When would be the appropriate time to ask whether this can be broken down into separate sections under 6.5 of the standing orders? Would it be now or after it's moved?
Well, I can probably answer that now. Yeah, look, I think you're referring to Rule 6.5 of the meeting procedures, which allows the breaking down of complex questions. The presiding member, i.e. myself, may order a complex question to be broken down and put into the form of several motions, which will be put in sequence. Look, I really don't think it's that complex, but because you've asked Councillor Powell, I'm happy to oblige. We won't have three separate debates though. We'll have the debate on C2 because it is a single officer report, but when it's time to call the vote, I'm happy to break down items 1, 2 and 3 of the officer recommendation into separate questions and to have separate votes because they each relate to different black spot projects. Councillor Kosovich moving the officer recommendation. And I'll look for a seconder for the officer recommendation as well. Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Please let me begin by acknowledging the Director of Technical Services and his team of engineers and support staff who have worked long and hard on this officer recommendation to ensure elected members are well placed to make an informed decision on these important matters. As a retired police officer of 43 years standing with WA Police, I can advise having attended countless serious road crashes and numerous fatalities throughout my lengthy career. Accordingly, I draw on this lived experience when I say that there is nothing more disconcerting than to see innocent lives lost or people badly injured due to the contributing factors such as speed, inattention and poor roads. I also underscore the fact that the proposed black spot treatment measures are unambiguously about forcing motorists to slow down when commuting on Derby Road, and accordingly, based on my experience, believe they will negate or reduce the likelihood of serious crashes and may even save lives in the future. I have reviewed the evidence-based submission by the city's engineers to Main Roads Western Australia, who oversight and manage both state and federal government black spot funding programs. The city's submission was scrutinised under cost ratio basis, BCR, which is derived from the anticipated benefit cost saving from the reduction in accidents for the cost to install. The specialist work was undertaken independent of the city by road safety experts who found that these projects not only qualified under this metric, but qualified at the higher end of the rating scale, making them eligible for 100% Australian government black spot funding. The city's engineers' assessment of Derby Road and the related proposed road safety treatments, as agreed to by Main Roads Western Australia, subject matter experts, and green-lighted for federal government black spot funding, have not been well received by a number of Derby Road residents. This is evidenced by a 22 signature petition opposing the implementation of the black spot treatments pertaining to Derby Road, and the attendance of a number of those residents here tonight. The reasons or rationale for the opposition, which initially was cited as noise pollution, that is the sound emitted from vehicle tyres as they negotiated the speed bumps. The petitioners had requested alternative traffic calming, such as speed awareness monitoring signs or chicanes to remedy the noise pollution. The city's engineers have reached out to these residents and explained the assessment process to them and the justification for the proposed black spot treatments, but to no avail. The lead petitioner has since provided an alternative, independent assessment of the black spot treatments and embarked on a campaign to lobby elected members around to her point of view. The thrust of her argument is that these locations could not or should not have been referred to the federal government black spot program without meeting the required criteria. That is due to the lack of supporting casualty crashes. A casualty crash being defined as those crashes classified as a medical, hospital or a death, essentially those intended to be targeted by the black spot program. She then makes reference to a report by an accredited senior road safety auditor, which stated in part, quote, installing devices that are not required that result in increased noise and emissions should be a difficult project to approve by a council that values the environment and livability. The city's manager of engineering services has provided an alternative, plausible explanation of the disputed data. In response to the requirement by the Australian Government federal black spot program that a project must have 3 casualty crashes to be considered for funding, he has advised when calculating a project's BCR, this is done using a Main Roads online analytical tool which takes account of all crashes, not just casualties. Therefore, all crashes and the proposed treatment measure either fully or partially addresses is proportionally included in the BCR for this project. He further advises that while this project aims to reactively address the casualty crashes that have occurred, it also is about proactively reducing the risk of future crashes, which is aimed at avoiding those major property damage only crashes becoming potential casualties in the future if left untreated. He explained that speed plateaus are a tried and tested measure that is known to be very effective in improving road safety. He goes on to say that proposed speed plateaus would create a consistent low speed environment along this length of Derby Road.
Councillor Kosovich, take a moment to sum up if you would.
I would. Regrettably, the lead petitioner, who I greatly respect for her passionate community advocacy, and I have reached different conclusions with this important matter. I found her claims to be a selective interpretation of the casualty crash data in particular. Instead, I prefer the expert advice provided by the city's engineers and the Main Roads experts who have unequivocally endorsed the process undertaken by the city to assess this data, as well as the proposed black spot road safety treatments. I would also like to ask my fellow elected members to to come to the same conclusion, as there is nothing before us by way of superior peer review of the statistical data that would allow us to do otherwise. There is simply no justifiable reason not to proceed with these Black Spot Road safety initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'm happy to second this motion, more particularly to get it out there and for us to discuss. I welcome and look forward to the discussion around Councillor Powell's amendment, because I do think that adds to it, but we'll come to that. Obviously, there are three locations talked about in this motion: Salado Road, the Derby Hatesby Road, and then the Derby Aberdare Nicholson Road. All of these spots, all these locations are eligible for 100% support from the federal government, and as I understand it, the federal government support is more stringent requirements to achieve than the state government. I really welcome the contributions that the community have given for Nadia, for her very good faith engagement with me, and I think with other members around this, and I really thank her and her neighbours rather, who have come out today to share their views. I find it a very difficult decision, trying to balance the concern of Nadia and her neighbours, the issue of safety in the community, and just how do we go forward on this. I also want to say that I think it's difficult, but I'm not driven by funding needs, meaning I don't think we should do anything to get the money. I think we get the money to help us achieve what we want to achieve. And I think that's an important aspect in the debate here tonight, that we may be fortunate enough to get federal funding for this, but we're not doing it only because we're getting the money. Whatever it is that we're doing, I think we should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. A few meetings earlier, before this one, I submitted the petition on behalf of residents and was very happy to do so. And as I say, been very happy to engage in discussions with them further. I'm not an engineer. I'm required to make a vote on a decision that has an engineering basis to it. I've listened to staff. We've had a strategic workshop. We've had other discussions, a lot of emails, a lot of discussions individually with members and about things. We've talked with the community members. We've received independent auditors' comments on this, all of which I've been trying to weigh up and trying to find a way through. I think this comes down to three things. Rationale. Is this a genuine black spot? I'm afraid I reject any argument that says it's not. I think that this is clearly, there seems to be no basis on which we would, any of the staff or anybody, would choose one site and suggest that there's another, and leave other sites as not being attended to. I think it's very clear that this is genuinely a black spot. We could argue about the windows in which data were accepted, data was collected, and whether or not that's correct. But I think if we then go on to the second part of this, is why is it a black spot? What are the drivers? Excuse the pun. What are the reasons for these crashes? And I think, as many of the statements tonight have said, increased volumes, more cars on the street, speed, street parking, and congestion. These were all the things that I heard people speak to tonight. And so I think we have to recognise, even if there was a blip or a change in a different window of data collection, the drivers are going to continue. The opportunity for crashes are going to increase because none of those things are going to change. So then the question for me comes to, well, what are we going to do about it? What is the treatment? And I honestly don't think there's a silver bullet here. There's a presentation to us here around raised humps, and I think there's value in that. I think we've compared that in a strategic workshop with other treatments that could be done. We want to sort of identify what those things are. We don't want to just shift the crashes somewhere else. We actually have to realise that there are a range of things that could be done to address this. So we've certainly not, in terms of all the considerations, we're not choosing the most expensive one. I must say I reject the suggestion that multi-million-dollar treatments are being used to address this issue. That's certainly not what's in front of us. I think we're doing a very proportionate response here, but it's not a silver bullet. We should be looking at speed limits. We should be looking at a range of other things that we can do at the same time, and this will bring us on to what Councillor Powell's amendment is that I'm very interested to learn of and to be a part of. So no silver bullet. I support going forward in this discussion. I look forward to engaging with other members about this. I particularly look forward to hearing the amendment, because I do think we need to do something about this. We need to think about the most proportionate and the most effective response. And I think, we have a responsibility as elected members, not just to respond to the issues that have been raised by the residents of the street, which I completely respect and
Thank you. Are there any councillors wanting to speak against the officer recommendation in its current form? Okay, well, now I might, unless you want to speak against it, maybe we'll just test the amendment and then we'll resume the debate. Councillor Powell, we've had your amendment foreshadowed a couple of times. It's as submitted prior to the meeting. You're proposing that a couple of extra paragraphs be added to the officer recommendation, which would cause a few things to happen post-implementation of the works on Derby Road. We'll have you moving your own amendment. Is there someone who's prepared to second the amendment? Councillor Johnston seconding. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And look, I'll speak only to the amendments in this section, and I'll speak to the substantive motion after we've dealt with the amendments, if that's all right. Look, as we can see here tonight, the road treatments can be controversial and they can generate quite a bit of community angst, as in this case. We've been told by staff that in most cases where there have been community fears about the impact after installation of this type of road treatments, the community worries oftentimes fade as the results are far from as dire as the residents had predicted. And look, there are lots of road treatments in Subiaco that haven't raised issues. My concern is that some of the feedback we should be getting is anecdotal. It's based on a lack of complaints after a project is completed. But then it's quite possible some residents might feel that after it's been done, what will any complaint achieve? Silence does not necessarily mean support or approval. So I would like us to be proactive and actually assess the success of these projects or otherwise. Whether they do change traffic flows, whether drivers turn to other routes, how effective they are at reducing speed, how they affect the crash stats, both major and minor. These road traffic calmings, especially with the raised plateau, do affect the amenity of the street residents, but how much, in what way? There's always going to be a trade-off in this sort of thing between safety and the amenity of the community. So yeah, as I said, I'd like us to be proactive and have hard evidence when we consider future black spots.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Member McMullen. I think this item's been a bit of a struggle for me to get my head round, to be honest. I'm not an engineer either. And the data has not always gelled, the data that we've had from staff and the data that we've had that's been very well researched by Nadia and some of her sources. To my mind, it looks extremely credible. So some of that, I think, has made it very challenging. I also think there's the community consultation that's taken place is pretty loud and clear what the community want. However, we're in this position, and clearly there's an issue there. Speed humps, it will probably cause some loss of amenity for people that live in that area, and I hear that. Clearly, they would like a speed limit reduction. This amendment goes some way towards that. It doesn't, I think, sort of say the time frame, and staff have responded that will be explored with Main Roads Department. I would really like an assurance as to the time frame of when that would happen, because I personally think the speed limit reduction would be is the critical thing here. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of concerns and I see a number of flaws in the amendment. And I've just made a few dot points and I'll just go through them and see if they resonate with anyone else. The monitoring of black spot projects is conducted by Main Roads WA and not the city. So I think we may have a demarcation issue with this. As part of their monitoring, Main Roads take a sample of all projects across the black spot program. As such, there is no guarantee that the city's projects will be automatically reviewed. The amendment will result in a drawdown on resources, that is staff time, and an independent consultant's cost, and will need to include Main Roads as the program is fully funded by the Australian Government Black Spot program. Black spot projects are funded and awarded through a strong evidence-based process and rigorous selection. As such, this process may negate the need for further reporting, as the city would have already successfully demonstrated the need for this. In terms of community expectations, should there be a future decision, say 12 months from now, to remove or alter the constructed work on Derby Road, the Main Roads may require funds to be returned, as this would be a first for the city, and accordingly the city would need to seek further advice from Main Roads to determine how they would treat this scenario. The city currently does not have a budget for refunds to Main Roads, nor any costs of removal and reinstatement of this project. Staff have estimated the cost to be roughly half of the project build cost, so in the region of $80,000 to $100,000. That is on top of any funds that may need to be returned to Main Roads. Moving on to the speed limit part of the amendment.
Point of order, Mayor.
What's the point of order?
I've only moved point 4. I haven't spoken to point 5.
Oh, that's not how we move amendments, Councillor Powell.
What are you? So you've taken both those?
Yeah, of course I have. That's how you submitted it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Carry on, Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the speed limit reduction covered off in the amendment, I'm advised that a request to Main Roads to have a 30k speed limit, or 30 kilometres speed limit on Derby Road between Nicholson Road and Onslow Road without any supporting infrastructure measure would not be supported. The current speed zone project that inner city councils are collaborating with Main Roads on would see the speed limits reduced to 40 kilometres over time. The main premise behind this speed zone project is to improve safety by tackling large areas of networks, so any speed changes make sense to the driver and ensure better compliance levels. A speed reduction to 40 kilometres on a single road in isolation, like Derby Road, is likely to be supported. The area-wide project is at least 12 to 18 months away and still needs to go through technical analysis and wider public engagement. It is for these reasons I'm unable to support this amendment. Moreover, the unintended consequences highlighted, with particular regards to the financial aspects set out in the amendment, make it unviable, at least in its current format, and accordingly I believe it would be unwise to proceed further until the city is better placed to fully understand what is being asked or expected from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And just to address any confusion, an amendment's been submitted which would propose the addition of a new point 4 and point 5. Councillor Powell has moved his amendment, which consists of both those points, and if carried, both those points will be included if in the officer recommendation and motion. If the amendment's not carried, then there will be no change. Is there a speaker for the amendment? Councillor White. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, look, as I mentioned earlier, I was pleased to see this coming forward. I do think it adds much more in terms of addressing the, we don't have a silver bullet to this. We have to be more holistic in terms of how we address it, and I thank Councillor Powell for this. I recognise the concerns that Councillor Kosovich has raised. I don't necessarily agree with them, and I just want to talk to at least one of them directly. As my understanding of the Local Government Act is that we have a right and a responsibility to monitor the safety and well-being and quality of life for residents, businesses and visitors. So it's not, we don't get ourselves into a demarcation dispute here. We have a responsibility to keep track and monitor what's going on in our streets. Yes, there's a black spot program and they have their roles to run that program and do all of that. Regardless of that program, we still have a responsibility to ensure that people are driving and using our streets in a safe manner. And so I think what Councillor Powell's amendment has brought is a much more a greater opportunity for us to think more holistically about this and to track progress as we go forward. Yeah, we can do that in conjunction with state and federal government, but we have a responsibility to do that ourselves. I hear Councillor Kosovich on the issue of change of speed limits. Personally, I'm up for that. If we, if we want to go further with this and have a reduced speed limit around our suburbs, I'm the first in line for that. I think we do need to think about what is it that we need to do to make our streets safer, safer for driving, safer for walking, safer for biking. And I think a reduction of speed limits is very likely a way in which we'll go. So maybe what this amendment is suggesting is that we're exploring that with the Main Roads Department. And I'm not trying to push that away in terms of any degree of urgency. But I think Councillor Kosovich is right to say there are other aspects to how we achieve that have to be gone through. But let's do it. As I say, I'm very much up for that. I really believe we need to, in the sake of having safer streets that we use by people of all ages, biking, walking, driving, that we need to be really looking at these kinds of measures. And I thank Councillor Powell for bringing the alternative, or the amendment rather.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Burns, a question.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen, and through you to yourself, if you like, or where you see fit. In reading our meeting procedures, local laws of 2013, under section 7.5, that we, I'm not paraphrasing, but we moved to the next item of business, basically. The last section, which would be D, reads, there is no requirement that the matter be raised again for consideration. The nature of my question is this, where it says there is no requirement for the matter to be raised again, it does not by any means, am I right in thinking, by no means does that mean it cannot be brought back if the staff see fit in a different form, etc. It doesn't, it would not stop it. It just says it doesn't have to. Doesn't mean it can't. Would I be correct?
My understanding of 7.5 of it is that it consists of 4 paragraphs which must all be read together, and I think if you read them together it makes it pretty clear that it talks about moving to the next item of business within that meeting only. So it's not to suggest that any particular topic never comes back to council again, but if a procedural motion under 7.5 were to be moved and carried, the debate on that particular substantive motion or amendment would cease immediately. No decision would be made. The meeting would move on to the next item of business, and as per paragraph 4, which you've raised, there would be no requirement for the matter to be raised again for consideration.
But it could.
Not at this meeting.
Not this meeting. That's what I meant. I mean, in the future. That's what I was asking.
Correct.
To quote you, asked and answered, Councillor. Subject to. I'll now interrupt the meeting. Subject to meeting procedures, local law of 2013, 7.5, that the meeting proceed to the next business. I can go through and read the whole thing if you're desirous of that, or you can. It is a requirement that it's read out, I believe, in full. Would you have me do that? 7.5
describes the effect of the procedural motion that you're talking about. Perhaps I'll seek clarity from you as to what you're intending, and clarity from governance as to what the motion means in terms of moving to the next item of business. Do we go to C3? Do we skip C2 entirely, or do we simply move on from Councillor Powell's amendment?
No, so 1A.
Yep.
And this item would then finish if it was carried. Oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to achieve.
So the next business, in the sense referred to here, would be to move straight to C3. There's no decision made on C2.
Correct. I have moved it anyway, so we're just discussing the details, but I've taken it as moved. It has to be now voted on and it can't be spoken on. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the procedural motion? The procedural motion lapses, and we'll continue with the debate on the amendment. I'll just check where we're up to. Is there a speaker against the amendment? Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, thank you to the community for coming tonight. Thank you to Councillor Powell for suggesting this amendment. Yeah, I'm rather torn, but I feel personally, I feel that we will be muddying the waters. We'll have to make a decision tonight. And I feel this may give an incorrect message to the community that this is a decision that in future might be revoked. I feel that one of our roles in local government and one of the things in the Local Government Act is that we provide leadership and make decisions on behalf of the community. That is one of the responsibilities we have. And I feel that there is that balance always between making sure we're advocates for our community, where we listen, but also where we have to make decisions that sometimes are really hard and definitely comes on the side of, the local community might feel this isn't the right decision, but in the greater good, the equity argument, this is going to be definitely the greater good. But, you're always weighing these things up. But coming back in a year, personally, I'm not for that. A project like this can take some time for people to become accustomed to, for drivers to become accustomed to. I'm personally always an advocate for the 1 to 3 years giving a project a go. If it comes back and, you've mentioned if there is an adverse impact on Derby residents, I'm also interested in the positive impact on all the drivers who go down that road. What are the positive impacts? How can we assess that? It's the loose nature of the proposal. What are the parameters? Do we want staff to spend inordinate hours assessing this and working out what the parameters of this feedback would be and what would be the result of it? 100%, I support, applaud, constantly push for lowering the speed limit. That is definitely on my radar, and I think anyone who's heard me in debate will be hearing me talk about the risks and the dangers that I constantly feel are on the road. But I think to do an amendment tonight, just personally, I feel that I would be being disingenuous if I supported it, because I'd feel in future that we wouldn't be revoking this decision. It would be highly unlikely, and that would be a clear outcome. However, I do support this coming back in a few years' time with the Main Roads report on it, which is in the works anyway. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
I might just ask a question, because there's been some talk about reviews at the 1 year mark, and I just don't recall, Councillor Kosovich, if you mentioned anything further about that, but just a question for the acting director. What is the Main Roads WA guideline for evaluating effectiveness of road safety treatments? Well, if the acting director wants to ask the manager for health, no, that's you. That's your substantive role, isn't it? The manager in charge of these types of things, the manager of technical engineering services, then I'd be more than happy to take the advice.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so Main Roads advice on benefits realisation is typically they look at the 1, 3 and 5 year mark, and the reason for that is with these sorts of crash reduction projects, you can get quite a lot of fluctuation in your crash trends, and you need a substantial period to be able to actually get a good comparison basis to be able to make decisions about the effectiveness of a project. Main Roads will do that twofold. One, to obviously understand the effectiveness of a particular project, but also to inform their future decisions on treatment measures on the black spot program as well. So typically it's at the 1, 3 and 5 year mark. 3 to 5 years is recommended because you have more period of time to actually understand the effects of the changes that's been made. Thank you.
So they're the recommendations. Will the reviews actually happen or not in the absence of Councillor Powell's amendment?
The 1 year review would include things like the impact on the speed changes. That is measurable at the 1 year mark, but we wouldn't be able to get any discernible decision or outcome on crash reduction, because that's got to be at the longer 3 to 5 year period. That's the difference.
But just in terms of how the 3 and 5 year reviews come about, does that happen as a matter of course, or do you need a direction in order for that to happen? Who initiates it? Who makes sure it will happen? And is it going to happen?
So, Mayor, according to the guidelines, it's typically done by Main Roads. Like Councillor Kosovich had mentioned, it's not done by the city. There wouldn't need to be a direction per se. It's done by Main Roads, the difference being they will typically pick a sample of the entire program. So there is no guarantees that this particular project will be reviewed, but there's nothing to stop officers from actually doing the review of our own volition.
Speaker for the amendment. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. This is a very tricky item, and I appreciate the views of the community and also Councillor Powell for putting up this amendment. I also appreciate Councillor Kosovich's perspective on this matter, particularly in view of his background. I've said that I would speak for the amendment, noting Councillor De Vries's concerns about perhaps the impression of giving the community false hope that treatments might be removed. I don't see it in quite that same way. I see both points 4 and 5 as opportunities to explore information, to gather more information. In the first instance, in the case of point 4, I don't necessarily see point 4 as the end of that journey, and that we may then, as we've just been advised, still look to seek data at the 3 and 5 year marks as well, bearing in mind that after 1 year we may not have sufficient information to make any kind of informed or draw any informed conclusions. So I see point 4 as a first step on that fact-finding process. Point 5, to me, is a conversation that I don't see can have any harm to have. There's no harm in having that conversation approaching Main Roads about that. I think reducing speeds generally on our urban roads is a good thing. Whether reducing it to 30 in this area is achievable, we have yet to find out until we have that conversation with Main Roads. So for those reasons, I'm happy to support Councillor Powell's amendment. Thank you.
Speaker against the amendment. I'll enter the debate then. I will speak against the amendment. The simple reason is that sometimes it's possible to try and do too much in the space of one motion, and I'm concerned that that's what this is trying to do. The reviews are going to happen at the 1, 3 and 5 mark in any case, and as for point 5, changing the speed limit to 30 kilometres per hour, there's already discussions happening about the whole of the inner city district, which comprises us and South Perth and City of Vincent, and there's one more, City of Perth and Vic Park, that one too, making all of their and our roads 40 k's per hour, except in the case of busy and larger roads. These things need to be approached holistically, and to now signal that we'd be changing this short stretch of Derby Road to 30 k's an hour is problematic. I don't think this is the mechanism we should be opening the door to that. And look, as for the bigger ticket item of the introduction of point 4, I'd encourage councillors to be a bit more decisive in your decision making. If it's the case that the Derby Road treatments are unacceptable, then we've got an opportunity this evening to reject those treatments, and that's what should be occurring tonight. I do agree with Councillor De Vries that this amendment creates false hope. Just like deferring the item and bringing it back to this month's meeting has unfortunately, I think, created a sense of optimism and hope where there may not have been any due, I'm sorry to say. So I cannot support the amendment. I think we need to be bold in our decision making. If we want the treatments to go in, we approve them tonight. If we think that they're the wrong decision, then we don't. It's a fork in the road moment, and I can't support the amendment. Is there a speaker for the amendment? Speaker against the amendment. Okay, if there's no more speakers, we don't have any closing on the amendment, so I'll call the vote on the amendment. Okay, despite the Windows update that's happening on my laptop, I can confirm that the amendment is lost on a vote of 4 to 5. So the officer recommendations remains as it is with the 3 points to it. I confirm that we'll continue the debate in a consolidated fashion in relation to C2 as a whole, but when the time comes to call the debate, we'll break the recommendation down into points 1, 2 and 3 as per Councillor Powell's request. So far we've heard from Councillor White and Councillor Kosovich. I'll ask for any speakers against the officer recommendation, and if there are none, we'll just take speakers on either side of the table. Speaker against the officer recommendation. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen and councillors, and the gallery, staff too. I'm not going to discuss whether or not this is, there's a problem here. Okay, let's just accept there's a problem. Fine. Okay. However, I could argue that a stone's throw down the road where Nicholson hits the railroad and the underpass, right, would be 10,000 times more dangerous than what we're talking about and has been for decades. And nobody's ever done anything about it. Okay, it's two roads meet each other like this as opposed to that, and that just causes an accident almost every day of the week. But blind spot? How about blind eye? We're just putting our blind eye to it. So I look at several arguments. One, what are we doing on this? Okay, when there's bigger issues. That's one point. Okay. Another one is, okay, I'll accept. Again, there's a problem. I think everybody in the gallery that spoke, nobody spoke and said there's no problem, right? They just don't like the solution, okay? But it seems to me every time we have any sort of traffic issues, right, we just start pouring concrete. Okay, it's bumps and roundabout, and that's the only thing we've ever been able to come up with. Okay, except for, and I'm a big fan of the smiley faces, especially they don't smile at me often, but that's another matter. But there are other things that can take place, councillors. Okay, I don't want to live in Subiaco. Okay, that every time I drive 5 feet, it's just going to be another bump. Okay, and every time I have to, go just around another roundabout. Okay, and that's what the place is turning into. Okay, so we're not on our own on that. Some people, some local governments do more of it. Some do less. Okay, some don't do it at all. All right, but there are other answers. Anyway, I think everybody sees where I'm going. So I'm going to finish really quickly. This goose ain't cooked. Okay, we're trying to take it out of the oven. Okay, and it's half done as far as I'm concerned. Okay, if there's a problem here, I'd ask you to vote against it and vote it down entirely, because I'll accept there's a problem. Okay, but the solution isn't before us. The problem's here to a degree, but just putting bumps in, more bumps and more roundabouts, or fixing the roundabouts, is not enough for this councillor. And I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you. That may have been a speech against, so we'll take a speech for. Councillor, almost called you Councillor Russell. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. We've heard concerns about these proposals from many residents along Derby Road, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for taking the time to contact councillors to voice those concerns. If people don't let us know what they want, then it becomes difficult for us to represent the community effectively. That being said, we councillors now have to weigh up the officer's recommendation against the objections from the Derby Road residents, bearing in mind that our duty is to the wider community, including all road users regardless of their places of residence. I think it's fair to summarise the statements that we've heard tonight like this. Firstly, that black spot funding is intended to target collisions where injuries have occurred, and therefore the BCR calculation is incorrect because there haven't been sufficient casualties. And secondly, that speed was not a factor in the casualty collisions, and therefore a reduction in speed will not reduce the number of casualty collisions. In response to these objections, I'd make the following points. The BCR calculation is performed by Main Roads WA, not the City, and is verified by a federal black spot funding programme before any funding is granted. If the sites did not meet the criteria for the black spot funding, then the federal government would not have approved that funding. The BCR calculation defined by the funding programme includes all collision types, not just casualty collisions. The City has an obligation to consider all collision types, just like it has an obligation to govern in the best interests of all people in the area. While speed might not have been a factor in casualty collisions, it's likely to have been a factor in other major collisions. The difference between a major collision and a casualty collision in the BCR calculation is largely due to the high healthcare costs involved, not to any difference in the actual incident. For example, similar rear-end collisions may or may not cause whiplash injuries, and therefore reducing major collisions will also reduce the potential for casualty collisions. Speed plateaus have repeatedly been shown to be effective in reducing vehicle speed and in improving road safety. I'm therefore satisfied that the officers have correctly obtained black spot funding and that there are good reasons to expect that the proposed speed plateaus will result in a reduction in crashes. It's worth noting that there has actually been an increase in the number of incidents since the black spot funding application, from 16 crashes in the 2016 to 21 period to 22 crashes in the 2018 to 23 period. I don't want to see a continuation in this trend, and I believe that these interventions will improve road safety along these streets.
Speaker against the officer recommendation. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, I'm not entirely clear that I am speaking against the officer recommendation, but I think I'm probably falling more into the camp that I just don't think what we've got before us is the answer to the problem that exists, pretty much as Councillor Burns put it. Look, when this matter came before Council in the middle of the year, a number of residents, some of them are here again tonight, wanted Council to determine this project, not allow it to be a budget decision made in the previous year without further assessment by Council. Look, and I don't think we got the process quite right in that previous way, and a majority of elected members agreed with me. So that's why it's back here before us again tonight as a council to decide, as the residents have asked. Look, I had hoped in the intervening period that staff and residents could meet with each other and form some sort of compromise. And they have met, but it's a stalemate. There's, no progress. So tonight, yeah, we've got to decide, and it's not going to be an easy decision. One of the benefits of the interval between the June meeting and tonight is that it's allowed us to become fully acquainted and fully briefed on the issues involved. I think as been mentioned, we've had input via workshops, via WALGO presentations on black spots, and then there have been all the submissions from the residents and their experts. So there's no doubt that there's a lot of information before us, but much of it is divergent and conflicting. So the basic question is, for me, will these road traffic treatments improve road safety? Yes, argue the staff report, essentially because anything that slows traffic down improves safety. And that would appear to be a fairly straightforward argument. No, argue the residents, it will just add another obstacle to the difficulties on an already problematic road and make it less safe. It's also a valid argument. Look, there's disputes about the statistics, there's disputes about whether changing plans would terminate black spot funding for this road. There's even arguments, as we've been hearing tonight, whether it is a black spot. The only thing everyone agrees on is they want something done, they want a safer road, but how to achieve it. Look, and amid all that claim and counterclaim, I've tried to distill it down from those arguments, and it's not easy. But For me, it mostly comes down to an argument over two mid-blocked raised plateaus. That's the point of contention. Now, back in June, I said I used this section of Derby Road to get to council, and I did that again tonight. And nothing much changed. It's an unpleasant drive at peak hour, a slalom between parked cars on both sides of the road. And as I said then, and it's the same now, this effectively turns a busy road into a one-lane road. Tonight there was a bus stopping to let passengers off, and that brought traffic to a virtual halt. And that really is the problem, this slalom, and I don't see how raised plateaus are going to solve that problem. I've thought hard about possible solutions, but one so unpalatable it's not even on the table, and that would be banning parking on one side of the road. That would rightly cause uproar, even far more upset than there is tonight. But with increasing densification, I fear that that's a toughie that may be faced by a future council. And look, I really don't envy them for that. But that is not for tonight. What tonight we're looking at really is a hybrid solution. I think the council and staff have both worked hard to try and find solutions, but I don't really think either have. Staff argue that the solutions proffered by the residents, such as smiley faces, speed signs, they don't work. I think the chicanes would be problematic for buses and other big vehicles. And while I'm not a traffic engineer, it appears that even they can't agree, the experts. I don't think either party's got it right. So despite a plethora of new information, I don't see how raised plateaus will address the central problem. That's the slaloming of traffic and the one road. So unless I hear a convincing argument, I probably won't be supporting these raised platforms. Look, I have no problem with the rest of the treatments. The ones the roundabouts in the other two black spots, I think they're common sense and I think they will be effective. I don't have any real problem with the first half of the Derby Road one, from Aberdare to Onslow. But I do have trouble.
Thank you. Any speakers for the officer recommendation? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I've got no comment on points 1 and 2 of this item. I only want to comment on point 3. I appreciate the community of Derby Road bringing their concerns to council and speaking to me individually, some of them, and want to reassure them that they have been heard. Council is in a challenging position where we're presented with two very different interpretations of the situation and the solution to the accidents on Derby Road. One where speed plateaus are the recommended solution for the area between Nicholson and Onslow Road, and one where they are not. I appreciate that residents feel that speed plateaus may cause problems. However, they have been widely used both recently and historically in the city, and the evidence from officers is that in locations and situations similar, perhaps not identical, but similar to Derby Road, such as Townsend Road, they've not been problematic. As other councillors have said, we have a duty of care to our residents and also to people coming into Subiaco on our roads, whether they're residents or not. And in a week where there's been a tragic loss of life on Western Australian roads, and in a year, where we have the highest road toll in almost a decade, road safety is something to be taken very seriously. There needs to be treatment to calm traffic on Derby Road in response to these figures on accidents, and I feel the treatment needs to happen in a timely manner. I'm not comfortable about delaying any further. I appreciate that there are other perceived possible options for traffic calming and encouraging drivers to slow down that could have been employed in this situation. But there is evidence that smiley face signs do not result in long-term behavioural change in driver speeds, and chicanes would result in an undesirable loss of street parking and is not considered suitable for buses, which provide important public transport through the city. I'm comfortable with the rigorous assessment undertaken for the federal black spot program that's determined Derby Road qualifies for funding, and that speed plateaus, which are not the same as speed humps or bumps, are the most appropriate solution in the current context. Having considered all the information from the residents before this meeting and listened to the submissions today, and having read and considered all the information by the city's officers and in the agenda, I feel I have to support the recommendation by the officers.
Thank you. Any speakers against the officer recommendation? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, look, I support the items 1 and 2 of the officer recommendation. Like Councillor Powell, I have, I don't support item 3. I just find basically the evidence is not, it's not congruent. The information we've received from officers doesn't all align with the information that we've received outside. And I just think also, I agree that the process, I think the process lacked exploring other options in a meaningful way with the residents. We did community consultation and got residents interested, vocal and very concerned. And I think it sort of stopped there. I don't think we've really meaningfully exchanged ideas with them. They've talked about reducing speed limits. They're open to many, all sorts of other options, which we've just sort of slammed. The smiley faces. The remedy needs to fit the problem. There have been no casualty accidents in that mid-block section between Onslow and Nicholson along Derby. Our own statistics say that. There have been minor accidents, not casualty accidents. So will speed bumps actually change that level of accident? I don't know. It might actually make it worse. Most of the accidents seem to have been linked to cars manoeuvring in and out of driveways, car garages, parking, and that's predominantly due to the issue that Councillor Powell mentioned, that it becomes a single lane width of road because you've got cars parked on both sides, and it becomes that sort of the slalom course going through. So, I'm afraid I can't support putting a speed bump on both sides of that road. I just don't think it's going to solve the problem. I think slowing the speed will solve the problem. And if it's not going to main roads and asking them, can we reduce the speed limit, then I think we need to look at other options to reduce the speed limit. But I don't think speed bumps is going to actually necessarily do that. And I think the loss of amenity for the neighbours is, I think that's a major consideration. They live right on the road. Their bedrooms face that road. They're close to the road. I think that's a consideration as well. And we're not saving casualties in this space. It's a minor accidents. Thank you.
Councillor De Vries.
I think overall, the community have come today and spoken to us and given us their informed opinion and shared their thoughts with us, and for that I am extremely grateful. When a community engages on an issue, I feel that we're really connecting with you, and in this particular circumstance, I'm going to have to say I'm going to support the officer's recommendation. However, I am so glad that you have done that, and I hope that you continue to do that, even if tonight's decision doesn't go with you, because it is the very nature of our democracy that we do depend upon community engagement. So thank you for that. My arguments for supporting this come in part from my philosophy around equity-driven community benefit, and I believe that this black spot funding exemplifies this approach by prioritising road safety for everyone. Whether a Subiaco resident or simply passing through, all drivers have the right to safer roads, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure this. While I acknowledge the immediate concerns and fears of local residents, and I hope that so many of those fears are allayed, my decision tonight also considers the broader equity-focused perspective, which looks beyond our local community, to all those who use the roads. As a key decision maker, my role is to prioritise the future safety of our roads, especially in light of recent road deaths which caused by excessive speed. And like Councillor O'Connor, I have too been deeply affected by that. With increasing density in Subiaco, the volume of cars on the road is unlikely to decrease anytime soon. This makes it imperative that we adopt a holistic, system-wide approach to reduce the negative impacts of speeding and change driver behaviour for the better. And plateaus are deemed to be the means to achieve this. And in fact, in the workshop we attended, we found that in the last decade, the road treatments that we've had have reduced serious accidents or road incidents. So I'll just get the statistics. At least a 50% reduction in targeted crashes in the city of Subiaco. The office's report makes a compelling case for black spot funding, demonstrating that this project meets the highest level of benefit-cost ratio, the BCR, and offers substantial community benefits by enhancing road safety. This is not just a local initiative, but a statewide strategy aligning with the globally recognised safe system approach. So it's a system. It's not just this little area of road. The data-driven, evidence-based nature of this approach has proven to reduce road accidents and fatalities, and its continued application will lead to measurable improvements in public safety, and it has done so. We got expert advice on the 13th of August, where the workshop highlighted the different various treatment measures, concluding that raised plateaus are the most effective solution for traffic calming with minimal noise impact. And those that information did say that it's sort of like hearing in the background voices, or at worst, a vacuum cleaner. I really understood those noise concerns, but the report clearly states that this will not be an issue. I trust the report. Additionally, I find recent claims that these changes could increase road casualties, which was from the independent report submitted. I find that hard to reconcile. One person does not beat data-driven decades of work. Slowing down drivers and forcing them to be more aware should logically reduce, not increase, accidents. I feel we've learnt some valuable lessons from this about how we can engage better with our community, and I hope we take those away from this decision tonight. Ultimately, this black spot funding project represents the highest level of funding, meaning ratepayers in Subiaco bear no financial burden. It also brings environmental benefits by reducing accidents, minimising vehicle damage, and hopefully at some point saving lives, which we will not know about because that life will have been saved. Even one life saved justifies the approval of this project, and ensuring equitable access to safer roads is a responsibility that we as councillors cannot overlook. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. By my count, eight councillors have spoken to the item, so I'll take the opportunity to enter the debate as well. I will speak. Got to be careful how I say that. I will speak in support of the officer recommendation. Because, councillors, we've got a duty to take reasonable precautions against foreseeable harm, and we've got a moral duty as well. And the fact is, there is a risk of foreseeable harm. I don't really understand where the debate about whether this is a black spot or not came from, because it is one. It is a black spot. Everyone here agrees that something needs to be done, including the Derby Road residents. And alternative treatments will not work. We've explored them. I don't know why we're still suggesting that we haven't. I find it really surprising that that would come out in debate. And these smiley faces that we heard about this time and last time, the city's got one of those. They're those smiley faces that tell you how fast you're going, and if you're going under the speed limit, you get a little yellow smiley face. We've got one of those. We've trialled it, but the thing is, they are not permanent solutions. You have to. We move them around the city, and they have a temporary effect, and then that's it. Smiley faces, chicanes, all of those things which have come out in debate this time and last time will not work, and it's based on road traffic advice. And there's some things which, in my view, shouldn't come to council, and arguably this is one of those. It's a technical assessment, it's an exercise in skill in judgment, which, unless there are engineers around the table, traffic engineers specifically, I just do not see that we're adding a lot of value to the discussion and the assessment. But out of due respect, must in any case go to the councillors who've driven this process. And what I would say is that, regardless of my personal view on the Derby Road traffic calming and whether this is a council a matter that should come to council or not, the local government process has certainly worked. Our ward councillors have been very alive to the council, to the community concerns, and that's flowed through to every councillor and myself as well. There's been phone calls, there's been meetings, there's been emails, and there's been plenty of questions and probing that's occurred of our staff, both in meeting settings and out. The community's engaged with us, they've educated themselves, and I must say that they've conducted themselves in a very informed kind of way, in a respectful way. That is the best type of engagement that we see in our role as members of council. The one thing it seems that this process won't deliver, however, is the outcome that Ms Glazier would have us deliver, and that is to not carry out black spot works. There is a risk of foreseeable harm. Someone in my position couldn't, in good conscience, vote against these works. I wasn't prepared to do it in June, and I'm not prepared to do it now. And I signalled in June that unless something drastically changed, that nothing would change from my perspective, and it hasn't. You can just imagine what happens if we don't do these works and someone gets hurt or killed. The post has been mentioned a couple of times already, and that would certainly be post-worthy. It may even be front page, and I dare say that the West Australian and other media outlets would pick it up as well, because we would have failed in our legal and moral duties to the community. So let me just say to residents, you've been heard. I know that gives you cold comfort, but for what it's worth, I hope that you will bear with us for what I think is going to be a close decision to carry out these works, because we're not taxing you, we're not penalising you, we're not doing anything with the aim of making your existence harder. We've identified a problem, and we're doing what our professional advice suggests to us is the right decision to improve road safety for you, for your neighbours, and for the whole community. That's the reason why, after giving the matter much thought, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation, and I'd like to thank the community for your input and for councillors having a very considered, very sensible debate. There's a right of reply, and Councillor Kosovich, you moved, so you've got an opportunity to close.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a very difficult debate and a very interesting debate. No one wants to sit here thinking they've let the community down. I certainly don't believe we have. Black spot funding is Australia-wide. The Black Spot program came in because Australia, per se, has an appalling rate of fatalities on our roads. This is where we're coming from. I do have some regret that we didn't make a decision in June, and I think kicking the can down the road has heightened community expectation that we would get an alternative decision. We are dealing with a scientifically proven method, a methodology that is adopted worldwide. I thank all my elected members, my fellow elected members, for their input tonight, and look, I just urge you to think about it just before you press that button and vote for the right thing to protect our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, I'll call the vote. Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I am going to break down the questions. The first vote is in relation to the construction of raised speed plateaus at the Salvado Road and Old Jacaranda Way intersection. So that's recommendation 1. I'll call the vote on recommendation 1 now. I can't see your vote, Councillor Powell. Yeah, you're looking at me as though you have. Okay, there it is. Thanks. Okay, the item's carried 8-1. Point 2 of the officer recommendation, the construction of a new roundabout at Derby Road and Heytesbury Road intersection is approved. I'll call the vote on point 2. Okay, a similar result. The officer recommendation on point 2 is carried 8-1. And the final point, point 3, the construction of raised speed plateaus on Derby Road between Nicholson Road and Aberdare Road is approved. I'll call the vote on point 3. Okay, point 3 is carried also on a vote of 6-3. So that's item C2. We'll move on to C3 now, the Central Precinct Parking Plan. We've got an officer recommendation in relation to the precinct plan, and we need an absolute majority vote to carry this, and there's also an amendment and an alternative from Councillors Jones and Councillor Johnston. And as we heard earlier, there's 2 proximity interests, so Councillor Powell, other South Ward councillor, Councillor White and Councillor O'Connor will leave the room for this item. Thank you both. Yeah, you want to break it down?
Well, there's only 2 that I'm concerned about, but
Yep.
I'm not the only one. So.
Okay, so yeah, we could do that. It's just H and J that are of concern. Very pragmatic solution, councillors. We'll do that. Okay, do I have an officer recommendation, a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C3?
Sorry, yeah, I'm a little confused about that.
Are we doing? We're pulling 8 to vote.
Well, look, I think like we did last time, we've got to move and second the officer recommendation. We've got a single report, a single agenda item, but when it's time to call the vote, I will break it down into, well, I think we'll have 2 votes. We'll have a vote on one, we'll make it 3 votes, a vote on 1H, a vote on 1J, and then a vote on everything else.
Could I ask a question? Would it be possible then, after it's moved, to then move a procedural motion just to...
Yeah, I think like we deduced previously, it would actually end the debate on the whole item, because 7.5 says that that no decision is made on the substantive motion and the meeting moves to the next item of business. Yeah, so 7.5 clarifies what 7.1A does. Councillor Johnston.
So can I ask, with the alternate that I've put forward, how will that get dealt with in that context?
Unless we vote down C3, it won't get considered. Okay, a mover and a second for the C3 officer recommendation. Councillor Kosovich moving, thank you. Councillor De Vries seconding, thank you both. Councillor Kosovich.
Can I reserve my right to speak, given the nature of the way this is being handled at this stage?
It's a difficult request because the order of call under the meeting procedures says that the mover states the motion, the second to seconds, and then the mover speaks to the motion. I think that would be a deviation from the meeting procedures.
My apologies, Mayor, and my fellow councillors. Look, in the main, I am supportive of the officer recommendation. Parking is a difficult issue. It's a difficult issue to get right, and it's always going to displease someone. But I think in the main, and given the way we've broken it down, I think we have the scope and the flexibility to move around the 2 difficult items and support and deal with those separately. So in the main, notwithstanding what I've said, I'm happy to support the officer recommendation, which I think overall will make significant benefits to the city, particularly in terms of 1-hour parking bays coming in for a meaningful reason, to stop people gaming the system in particular, occupying, as it does happen in my street, occupying a parking bay for 2 hours and then coming back and looking for another spot and just moving the car a bit further. But against that also, I understand that if you're coming into Subiaco and you've only got 1 hour parking, it's nigh on impossible to do your business, particularly if you're going to the coffee shop or to John Claude's or whatever to do some business. 1 hour is very restrictive. However, in saying that, I believe there's a simple solution to that, and that is look for alternative parking, 2 hour parking around the city, or other, and there's even, I think, 3 hour parking at some stages at places too. So that's my general understanding, and that's where I'm coming from with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, I think I've come to the conclusion that this is a bit more complex than I initially thought, especially given there were concerns raised tonight about parking around the Scout Hall. But I did note the officer's recommendation that would be an opportunity for a little bit of walking from Palms where there's 3 hours parking. I think that this is something that will come back for review in the next, hopefully with the assistance of the amendment, that should come back for review. And I think in this case, there will be anyway ongoing assessments for how this is working. But the reasons behind these changes these are part of the planning policies. This is part of an ongoing and updating of the parking precincts, which were first introduced in your time, perhaps in February 2014, and is reviewed every 3 years to ensure that parking controls are clear, consistent and appropriate to the locality. To provide context, recent parking changes were implemented in November 2023 after public consultation to ease congestion around the town centre and King Edward Memorial Hospital. These efforts aim to create an additional 23,920 parking opportunities annually. Fees for parking stations such as Bagot Road, Car Station 24, Barker Road, Car Station 11 and Hensman Road, Car Station 4 were reduced to $10 per day with the first hour free, or up to $4.50 for 3 hours. So these are parts of changes to create more equitable parking opportunities. These current proposals build on these earlier efforts, addressing ongoing concerns from King Edward Memorial staff and families as well who need affordable long-term parking. And for those of us who were on council in August 2021, council committed to improve parking options for King Edward Memorial staff and particularly NICU patients, offering free all-day parking on Stubbs Terrace within approximately 800 metres of the hospital with these permits, which are rotation. They can rotate between family members from the hospital. This latest proposal further supports hospital staff and visitors to the hospital by lowering fees at Stubbs Terrace Car Station 70, where there are 51 bays, from $10 to $5 a day. Parking in Subiaco has always been and will continue to be a contentious issue, and it remains challenging to satisfy all stakeholders. And I'd be interested to hear a bit more about the concerns for those two points that have been taken out of the officer's recommendation. I just think we need to recognise the needs to balance the interest of residents, visitors and daily commuters. As part of our Strategic Community Plan 2017 to 2027, we aim to make Subiaco a destination of choice for living, working and recreation. Ensuring equitable parking solutions in high-demand areas is integral to this goal, as outlined in our latest Local Planning Policy 5.1. It is my hope that these changes create opportunities for the residents, but also continues to encourage visitors to come to Subiaco, but also hopefully provides for those recreational users of facilities such as the Scout Hall in a fair way that doesn't discriminate against the local community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Given we're breaking up the vote and there might be mixed views on H&J versus everything else, I'll just ask for speakers as they come. I won't try to identify whether you're speaking for or against, so I'm happy to take any speaker at this point. Councillor Jones? I'm aware there's an amendment. You want to try it now? Okay, now's as good a time as any. Just confirming we're going to test Councillor Jones's amendment on C3, which would add a new point 3 to the officer recommendation. We'll take it as submitted and as shown on the screen. Councillor Jones is ready and willing to move it. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Jones's amendment? Any councillors who haven't spoken? Councillor Powell, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. We've received several representations in relation to the modification to the parking scheme from residents who are concerned that they will lose access to street parking. But we've also heard from the city's officers that they're confident this is unlikely to be the case. This amendment makes sure that the city provides the council with evidence as to the effectiveness of the changes by requiring the officers to seek community feedback on the results of these changes and to produce a report for consideration by the council 18 months after the implementation of the modifications. The council will then be in a good position to assess whether the modifications have had any undesired effects and whether further modifications are needed to mitigate these effects.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
No, Mayor, I was just seconding it so I could get it on the table, so I think so we can vote.
Any speakers against the amendment? Any speakers for? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. My concern with this, I've actually got quite a few concerns with how the consultation process occurred. And I'm aware that some residents on Redfern Street weren't notified that this was happening because the changes weren't happening to their street. So even though their street is adjacent to all the other affected streets, they weren't notified. So they only heard about this, I think, when it was put in the post, and only the ones that read the post heard about it. So there's been limited time for the residents there to find out about this, and they have lived through various parking changes in that area and been impacted accordingly. I believe 2 residents, one of them, I think here tonight, made a statement in Have Your Say, but really it's been really limited for them to have the opportunity to have input. So I would really support these, but I should have put an amendment forward rather than an alternate, that some extra consultation happens specifically with Redfern residents, and maybe they need to be included in the 1 hour parking.
Any other speakers to the amendment for or against at this point? Okay, well, look, I think we're probably ready to vote on the amendment. Are you wanting to speak to it? Okay, I saw a shuffling of papers. Councillor De Vries.
I'm actually in the awkward position of doing a sort of thinking back flip on this one, but I'm concerned that when we start changing the goalposts on what is currently in the plan for the length of time that we give to parking changes, I think that means we're going to have to do it across the city, and it concerns me that that's just 18 months. It's a huge amount of work, it's a huge body of work, and I might be incorrect, but I just read the officer's response, and I have to say, coming late to that thinking, I'm probably moving to not supporting the amendment, although in my heart of hearts I do believe that more community consultation is really important, but I think there was a fair bit of work done in the initial stages to think about how this would go, but just wondering if we're just making too much work for the officers within the whole city. So yeah, I might not support it, but...
Any other speakers to the amendment? Question from Councillor Burns.
Thank you. Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor McMullen. The question's this, all of these items with regards to review could be I could pick any street in, or any particular loading bay or whatever else, and could be brought to the staff on an individual basis, saying, "Look, we've got a problem here. Going to be looked at," and we would not. There's no process where it says, "Sorry, we only do it every blah blah." It can be done anytime. Am I right in my thinking there?
This was one of those rare times I wasn't really listening to you, Councillor Burns. Acting Director, Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you. Yes, delegated authority exists with the Director of Technical Services, the Manager of Health and Compliance, and the Coordinator of Compliance Services to make changes to parking controls as required. So there does exist an ability to, add some refinements to the parking precinct plans as we go through. So there's no requirement to wait those 3 years. Thank you.
Any other speakers to the amendment? Follow-up question for Councillor DeVries.
Yeah, that's just a follow-up question. So thank you, Councillor Burns, for raising that. This is through you, Mayor, for Acting Director of Technical Services, or to the CEO. Would this be an elected member's motion that might bring about, so should there be enough community pressure, and then there was some sort of, how would that work? Would it go through an elected member's motion, or would it be another process? Thank you.
CEO?
Ordinarily, when there's implications, generally it comes quite often from the community talking about parking issues, etc. And then Chris's team will look at the compliance issues and whether that's the particular issue. And as we've described, quite often there can be flow-on effects that need to be considered. So his team are on the street daily as well. So it could come that way. It could also come via an elected member may be approached and said, "Look, there's an issue here, we'd like you to look at it." And generally, ordinarily, staff will have a look at that and consider that. And the way we usually feed back that is our weekly elected members information bulletin, and generally what we do is if there is some sort of perceived issue that a number, or it could just be one person has, we would also seek to find out if councillors wish to have more information on that. But as the acting director has quite rightly put out, it could be that we would just let you know that we actually need to change something because something is actually happening. So the question would be whether or not we feel there's some sort of intervention required, but generally we'd inform elected members of that as that would occur.
Thank you. I'll enter the debate just to speak in favour of it and to essentially explain why I'm doing that when I didn't support Councillor Powell earlier on. Might be something I could discuss over dinner, but I'll discuss it now. Look, there's a few things that I think separates this from the other amendment on C2. If we want to make changes to the parking precinct plan later on, it's relatively easy to do. If we wanted to tear up the road later on in Derby Road, that would be quite hard. Here, we're not talking about life and death, whereas with traffic treatments we are. So what might be 18 months of inconvenience and lost parking to some is, I think, quite a different proposition to what happens if you don't put in things to make the roads safe. This is something which we don't really know. We don't really know how this plays out. We think changes will have a certain effect, but we don't really know, and we're very conscious of the people in the community who've come to us expressing concerns. There's not really data or a field of expertise that can help us know exactly what happens if we make these changes, but what we will be able to do is look at this in 18 months' time and say, okay, well, there have been unintended consequences or there haven't been, and adjust accordingly. And look, finally, it's not trying to do too much. It's very contained, very short and to the point. It's very demure, very mindful, if anyone's seen the meme. I hope you know what I'm talking about, but I do support the amendment, very much so. Very demure, very mindful. Who hasn't spoken to the amendment? Councillor Burns.
Thank you. Just to be as brief as possible, parking's the Oxford definition of causality. You know what I mean? You just don't know. You know what I mean? You do it here, it affects there. Okay, it's just it's a blow-on effect of everything. And it isn't. You know, it's got nothing to do with what we were talking about, as the mayor has said on the previous item. Okay, this just plays out. You know what I mean? Some of it'll be great. Some of it'll be, you know what I mean, cause the next street on to, you know what I mean, to be screaming up and down, which we've seen a million times, especially around hospitals. It just keeps people just keep moving further and further. I just think it's always going to be dealt with on case by case. You know what I mean? I'll give you an example. I mean, Catherine Street. We made for Catherine Street people only because they screamed up and down. I think they've got like 4 bays on Catherine Street. You know, it's taken a long time, but taxis went, and the 3 taxi bays outside of Salvo, across from Lenny's, and outside of OPSM. Have now become 15 and 30 minutes. I think some of them are 15 and some of them are 30, something like that. But, you know, it took us a long time to work out that they were just sitting empty because taxis didn't act like taxis anymore. So it's, you know, it's a game with no end. And it'll always be looked at, and it'll always be, I think, to quote our acting director, unless the CEO said it, but one of you is going to get the credit. No, it's you actually, right? It's not you, right? Yeah, I think you said it about him actually. Now that I think about it, you're on the streets, you know what I mean, and that's where the answer is what you see. This is not, you know what I mean, a report. It's, you know, you see what's going on. So thank you.
Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Kosovich.
I'm supportive. I think this value adds, and I think it'll be good to get feedback in 18 months' time. I think that is going to feed in, and it's such a contentious issue. So I just see it as a value-adding exercise, and which I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone left in the chamber has spoken to the amendment, so I will call the vote. We'll call the vote first, unless you're unsure about what happens next.
Could I ask a question relating to the vote?
Look, I don't think it's going to change the bearing, but yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to get a little bit more clarification through you, Mayor, when CEO Cameron was talking about what if residents are having a problem with parking, with issues as a result of this, and are directly impacted negatively. What's the process for them, and what sort of time frame would it take for them to get a remedy?
CEO?
Really around the time frame.
Yeah, well, as I said it, and I'm conscious not to enter debate, so I'm just describing how we actually evaluate the situation. It may be that people are upset and they've provided information, and our people on the street have done the analysis, and either it is or it isn't. In terms of that, we would provide that feedback to elected members through the weekly bulletin, that information, seek whether you wanted further information, particularly if we weren't going to do a change. If alternatively we considered actually there is a requirement because the matters have changed as unexpected and compliance is not dealing with that, usually we'd give compliance a go first, then we could turn that around if officers felt they turn that around probably about 4 to 6 weeks, as I understand it, in terms of the way in which delegation works, once we had determined the patterns were in place and that compliance wasn't an effective tool.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'll call the vote on the amendment. Okay, the amendment is carried 6-1. So we'll resume debate on C3 as amended. I don't think we've heard from too many people, possibly only about 2. So I will take speakers who haven't spoken on the thing so far. Are there any speakers against the officer recommendation as amended? We'll just take... Okay, Councillor Burns. Either way at this point.
Well, only to say that I'm acceptant of. Oh God, okay. I think you all got what I said, even if I didn't. Of the recommendation, subject to the fact that I think we need to look to a old colleague of mine and councillor who spoke about H and J, which we're going to deal with separately. So I'm supportive of it, with adding the codicil that it's I'm not with regard to those two particular points, and I think that hopefully other people aren't as well. So yeah, so supporting but not all the way. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just ask a question of the acting director. If we didn't support H and J, what would happen? Would we make all the other changes and leave the current parking controls in those two particular areas as they currently are?
Thank you, Drew, and yes, you're correct. Yes.
Okay. Speakers for or against the officer recommendation? Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, through you, Matt. This is just a question regarding any possibility that users of the Scout Hall could get parking permits to enable them to stay longer than 1 hour. Is that any remote possibility that that could happen? Thank you.
Acting Director.
Thank you, and through you. Currently, we don't have any permit types or that would be available to community groups or businesses. They're fairly exclusively for the use of residents and visitors to Subiaco. But yeah, currently there is no scheme in place for that. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Look, there was a very high response rate to this consultation, 345 submissions and a clear division between what the hospital's workers want, essentially that's free parking with no restrictions, according to the officer's report, and what the residents in the neighbouring KMH want. That's tighter restrictions to allow them to park in their own streets. Now, council's responsibility to its own ratepayers, I think, is fairly clear, but we do also have a responsibility to workers who come to work in our city. And look, we have to balance those competing interests. And here I'm going to have a bit of a rant because there's one player who never turns up. That's the state government who owns the hospital. But they stonewall and refuse to take any responsibility. Nearly all the parking at the hospital, a bit over 500 bays, is allocated to staff, and that still isn't enough, and certainly not enough for visitors. So I think the state needs to come to the party and not just say, well, the hospital will be relocated at some time in the future and that'll solve the problem. In the meantime, I think it's shirking its responsibilities and leaving us to sort out some of its problems. So that's my little rant. Anyway, what's before us tonight is part of the updating of the Central Parking Precinct. Council is trying to provide some solutions, offering the Stubbs Terrace car park, which is about 300 metres from the hospital, as all-day parking at $5 a day, half the present daily rate. And I think that's a start. I also think it's possibly reasonable that if workers want free parking, they should be asking their employer, i.e. the state government, to assist them. After all, how productive is it if numbers of workers leave the hospital every few hours to repark their cars? I mean, how much more cost efficient would it be to just subsidise their parking? And look, as has been pointed out, when precinct plans change to cope with parking pressure in the vicinity of the hospital, there are often flow-on effects. Tonight we heard from a Redfern resident. I've spoken to him before. And he suggested 1 hour parking restrictions in Redfern and Federal Streets, stating past experience that when tighter restrictions are introduced, the flow-on effects saw hospital workers parking in his street. And I think basically he's arguing that higher restrictions won't affect residents with parking permits, so he'd like to see the same protection as the residents closer to the hospital. Now, we don't know whether these new reduced hours near the hospital would have an effect of pushing parking problems further away from the hospital, like onto Redfern Street. But it may be some comfort, as staff have already discussed tonight, and they have assured me that earlier that residents can petition to have the time limits on street parking reduced, provided there's sufficient support from the street, and it can be dealt with without coming back to council under delegated authority. There would need to be consultation, but the whole thing, I was informed, probably wouldn't take much more than a month. Finally, look, I'm not sure how the 1 hour parking limit will work for visitors to the hospital. I mean, after parking, getting to the hospital, finding their way to the ward, seems like there won't be much time for visitation before they're heading back to the car. In summary, these parking precinct plans are always difficult. We do try and get them right, but unfortunately we don't always succeed, especially in regard to the consultation processes, as you've heard from some people tonight. But we do try our hardest. Thank you, that's it.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Matt. Parking in the city is always going to be a limited resource, and no parking scheme is ever going to satisfy everyone. We have an obligation to consider the needs of all people in the district, be they residents, workers or visitors, and the best that we can do is to try to balance the needs of all these stakeholders and to monitor and review the situation to make adjustments when necessary. This set of modifications follows a period of review and consultation and is intended to improve the access to parking bays during business hours by reducing the time limit from 2 hours to 1 hour. I'm pleased that the city is slashing the all-day parking fees on the south end of Stubbs Terrace to $5. Hopefully this should encourage more staff at the hospital to use this area rather than illegally overstaying in short-term bays in crowded residential streets. This is one of the main concerns of the residents. They feel that many vehicles park for longer than the allowed time, sometimes for the entire business day, leaving nowhere for residents to park. And consequently, I do think that we need to look a bit more closely at our enforcement processes. In the days of the footy oval, the city had a reputation for being heavy-handed in enforcing parking regulations, and it has worked hard to dispel this reputation. I have some concerns about how far this has gone, and I've heard regular complaints from residents who tell me about office and hospital workers who habitually flout the parking restrictions with no apparent consequences. On the other hand, I'm still hearing a few complaints about overzealous enforcement, so maybe the balance is about right. In relation to the loading bay near the Scout Hall, I'm concerned about positioning it directly outside a building with a dedicated loading bay. This is about as far away from the businesses which would actually use the loading bay as it's possible to get. And I would much rather see it a bit further north along Rockaby Road. Doesn't have to be much further, but just past Duke Street would seem sensible to me. So I'm not satisfied that the positioning of the loading bay is correct. I'm much more ambivalent about the changing of the out from the 2 hour to the 1 hour, but the positioning of the loading bay is a problem for me. So overall, I support the officer's recommendation, but I do think we need to be paying better attention to the community on this one. I realise that the residents who have voiced their objections are going to be disappointed that the recommendation is not being changed, but this does not mean that we've not considered their objections. On the contrary, most of us have dedicated a huge amount of thought to these matters over the past few days. On balance, I've come to the conclusion that I don't have sufficient grounds to overturn any of the recommendations, apart from the ones we're pulling out. But I hope that residents will remain engaged with the city on this issue and continue to let us know of any problematic instances in the locality. That's the only way that we'll be able to understand and improve the precinct plan going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kosovich, do you want to close?
No, I don't, Mayor. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, just to confirm, there'll be a total of 3 votes. There'll be a vote on 1H, a vote on 1J, and then a vote on the remainder of the officer recommendation. So I'll begin with a vote just on 1H of the officer recommendation, and I'll call the vote now.
If we did it the other way around, if we did the bulk, then I would, back then I would be able to
Well, no, I don't think you can move a procedural motion once the vote's been called.
Well, the procedural motion, the vote would be called on all the items apart from H and J.
Well, no. No, I'm going to call the vote, guys. Come on. This has happened a couple of times tonight. I'm calling the vote on 1H. No, I'm calling the vote, Councillor. Everyone's spoken to the whole officer recommendation. I'm calling the vote on 1H, please. Everyone just vote on 1H and then we'll get through the other two votes. Oh, you made me make a mistake. That's carried. That's lost 6-1. Should have been lost 7-0-7, but I made a mistake. In any case, 1J.
You never do over. We're nice.
1J. We're calling the vote on 1J. Okay, that one was also lost 2-5. Okay, so just to confirm, the final vote is a vote on the officer recommendation minus 1H and minus 1J. So that's the remainder of point 1 of the officer recommendation and the remainder of point 2. I'll call that vote now. Okay, that's carried unanimously on a vote of 7-0. No outliers. Okay, that brings us to the end of C3. I'll ask for Councillors White and O'Connor to be called back in, and then we'll move a procedural motion to close the meeting for a single. Yep, okay. I think we probably all need one of those. We'll adjourn for a short period. 5 minutes. We'll be back on at 7:58 p.m. Back on. Okay, we'll resume the meeting at 8 o'clock. We've got a single confidential agenda item left, so I'll seek a mover and a seconder for a procedural motion to close the meeting pursuant to section 5.23C of the Local Government Act while the item is considered on the basis that we're going to be discussing a proposed contract. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the procedural motion? Councillor Jones and Councillor De Vries. I will call the vote on the procedural motion. Okay, the procedural motion is carried unanimously. Well, it is, but my vote's not showing up. But I assure you, I want to go behind closed doors, so we'll switch off the live feed and we'll. Okay, we're back out from behind closed doors, and I can confirm that Council has resolved in relation to item 13.1 as follows. That firstly, the part of Lord's Recreation Centre highlighted on the plan attached to this report is leased to Jegro Holdings Proprietary Limited, consistent with the terms contained in this report and otherwise on terms acceptable to the city. And secondly, the Chief Executive Officer is authorised to execute any documents, deeds and agreements necessary to give effect to this resolution. Okay, that's the end of the agenda items. There shouldn't be any urgent business that needs to be dealt with this evening, so I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:05 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your contributions, and thank you, staff, for your assistance and advice.